Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our conversation today on name, image, and likeness. My name is Jaya Thomas, and I'm a Los Angeles-based sports and entertainment lawyer. I'm also the founder of Diverse Representation. For any of you not familiar with diverse representation, I just want to take a quick minute and give a brief overview about diverse representation before we jump into the conversation. Diverse Representation is a fairly new company. We are about 2.5 years old. And essentially, we are a collective of Black agents, attorneys, managers, and publicists in the sports and entertainment industries. Our ultimate aim is to make sure that more athletes and more entertainers are hiring Black agents, attorneys, managers, publicists, and financial advisors. If you go to our website, www.diverserepresentation.com, we provide a comprehensive directory of Black agents, attorneys, managers, and publicists. So if you're ever looking for one, there is a resource right there on our site to find them. And in addition to that, we also host different programs, events, and initiatives across the country, pre-COVID, and now virtually. You can follow us on Instagram at Diverse Representation and Twitter at Diverse Rep. The conversation today will be 1 hour, and then we will open it up to Q&A from you, the audience, for the last 30 minutes. You should see a box on your screen where you can type in questions, and we will try to get through as many questions as possible during the course of those 30 minutes. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our moderator today, Len.
Thank you, Jaya. First up, can we give Jaya a big shout out, a round of applause? Let me tell you why. Now, in an era where so many people want to build their brand and get followers and become an influencer, she is building an institution. And it is important that we as Black folk build institutions. At the lowest point of Black life, during Jim Crow segregation, convict leasing, sharecropping, lynching, we did the majority of our institution building. 90% of our HBCUs were built during that time. All 9 of our Black Greek organizations, ours came later, the Boulay 1904, I think Zeta Phi Beta 1920, 1922. Our large Black church denominations, the National Baptist Convention, the Church of God in Christ, and also our Black professional organizations, the National Medical Association, National Bar Association, the National Dental Association, and the Colored Teacher Association, and also our civil rights organizations, the National Council of Negro Women and the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, and also the NAACP in Urban League. Here's my point. Those were institutions that have sustained us. While I love the folks from the 60s, they were vibrant personalities. Fannie Lou Hamer, Stokely Carmichael, Ella Baker, Muhammad Ali, they didn't leave us institutions. So much of what went on in the 60s was built around people's personality, but now folks, we need institutions. So Jaya, on behalf of the community, we thank you. And what I love about you, and I just met you last week, is that this is clearly not about you, it's your vision, but you wanted to start something that would help us collectively. So can we give Jaya a big shout out, please? I've been waiting to say that for a week and a half, Jaya. So thank you for.
Thank you, guys. It's so nice. Nice of you. Thank you.
Institution building is critical. So my name is Leonard Moore. I'm a product of Cleveland, Ohio. Professor at the University of Texas at Austin, and I also serve as the founder and executive director of the Black Student Athletes Summit, an annual event held every year. We bring about 600 student athletes and professionals from the world of college athletics together to specifically focus, not on anybody else, but we specifically focus on the Black student athlete. So that is why I'm serving as your moderator today. We have a powerhouse panel, and when I give them the intro question, I'll let them tell a little bit about themselves. First, we want to go to Luke Fedlam. And Luke, tell us, after you introduce yourself, what name, image, and likeness is for those of us on the call who may not clearly understand.
Sure, absolutely. First of all, Leonard, let me just say, man, I've known you for a number of years, and you always get me fired up. Like, you just started us off, and I'm like, we on fire already, man. I love it. Thank you. So my name is Luke Fedlam. I am a partner and chair of the sports law practice at Porter, Wright, Morris & Arthur, a large law firm headquartered in Columbus, Ohio. I'm not an agent. I am a non-agent sports attorney. I'm also the founder and president of Anomaly Sports Group that focuses on educating and protecting student athletes, professional athletes, and groups and organizations. So that's who I am. Let's talk about name, image, and likeness. And if you don't mind, I'm going to take 2 quick minutes, because Leonard, y'all that are watching, Leonard told us he will rein us back in like Sandman if he needs to, if we go too long. So give me 2 minutes. I'll share with you what name, image, and likeness is and kind of where we stand right now. So name, image, and likeness, it really is this idea of your persona rights, right? It's the rights that you own in yourself. And name, image, and likeness, or NIL or NIL, it's really become the kind of lightning rod, if you will, around those intellectual property, those personal rights that you have in and of yourself to your name, Luke Fedlam, your image, which is your image out in the marketplace, and it could be an actual image of you, or your likeness, this some type of artistic representation of who you are. So if it's okay with you, Dr. Moore, Leonard, Dr. Moore, if it's okay with you, I want to maybe give a little bit of kind of update as to where things stand right now.
Yes. Right.
All right. So it's important to understand who the key players are, right? So we've got the NCAA first. So we know, as it relates to name, image, and likeness, there was supposed to be a vote last month by the D1 Council to approve new rules around name, image, and likeness for student athletes to be able to be compensated for the use of their name, image, and likeness. And that vote got delayed indefinitely based on the Department of Justice raising antitrust issues as it relates to the NCAA. So another player in all this, speaking of antitrust, is the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court agreed to hear a case called the NCAA versus Alston. All right, and in that case, it's an antitrust case. The Supreme Court hasn't heard a case involving the NCAA since 1984. We're talking about nearly 40 years. This is the first case involving the NCAA that the Supreme Court is hearing. And basically what they're going to be focusing on is education-related compensation as it relates to FBS football players and D1 basketball. So in other words, the question that they're going to be addressing is whether the NCAA, whether their rules regarding compensation of student athletes violate federal antitrust law. So just to give you a sense, they're going to hear those oral arguments at the end of March. There should be a ruling that comes by the end of June. So then we've got state laws, state legislatures, the other key player. States have driven this whole thing. This wasn't something that came about because the NCAA said, hey, we just want to give up these rights to student athletes, right? States drove this. It started off with California and their Bill 206. It went to other states. California said, hey, 2023 will go into effect. Florida said, that's great, but we're going to go into effect July 1st of 2021. And so now California is actually looking at moving up their effective date to this year, 2021. Iowa has bipartisan legislation right now that's being voted on that will cause their name, image, and likeness legislation to go into effect July 1st of 2021. And you've got about 35 other states who have considered, evaluated, and or voted on legislation related to name, image, and likeness. So states are most definitely driving this forward. And finally, you've got Congress, right? And you've got federal legislation. And so here we've got a lot of different legislation that's been introduced. I won't get into all of it, otherwise I'll take up the whole time. But the most recent is the College Athlete Economic Freedom Act. It was introduced by Senator Murphy from Connecticut. He's been a staunch advocate for student athletes' rights. And basically what that legislation proposes is it's free from any antitrust provisions that we know the NCAA is looking for. It authorizes the potential for group licensing among student athletes, and it leaves the door open for collective negotiation by student athletes. So not all out unions, but the collective negotiation of student athletes. So that's a whole lot. I will say this. The bottom line is we don't know what the exact rules are going to be, but we know that this change is coming, and that's why this conversation today is so important.
Thank you, Luke. Let me go to you, Rashida. You're big in the marketing and branding space. So once this legislation is passed, legislation is passed, what do Black student athletes and their families need to understand about this space? All right.
Well, first and foremost, thank you to Diverse Representation for putting on this wonderful panel. Everyone, my name is Rashida Gayle. I'm the founder and CEO of 26 Marketing Agency. Dr. Moore, in regards to your question, I think the first thing that athletes and the parents need to know is that from every angle, people are going to try to manipulate the situation. And so the biggest thing that you should do is educate yourself, but don't sign anything. And I think that really starts with Luke, right? His just approach to the industry and educating athletes and their parents and their families on how to approach not only name, image, and likeness that's coming about, but getting agents, any type of representation that they may need, any type of contract that they may sign, really understanding when a brand is asking you to have deliverables, what that looks like. So I think the first thing that athletes and their families need to know is that there are going to be so many different opportunities coming your way, and it's really, really important to build a strong team before you look at the marketing and the branding side, understanding that your team is going to essentially impact how well you do in that space and make sure that you do not get taken advantage of.
So Rashida, we're talking about marketing that let's say I play softball for Texas Southern or something like that. So you're talking about that I could potentially sign a deal where I can market anything from a soft drink to apparel.
Yep.
Okay. And what you're saying is don't sign nothing until they talk to Luke.
Yeah,
so
because honestly, from a branding perspective, there's going to be plenty of brands that come to you and they're going to ask you to do a bunch of different stuff. I think it's a step-by-step process. So in my opinion, Luke is the first person you're talking to. Then you're talking to Will and you're talking to Myah. You're getting your LLC set up. You're getting your tax stuff set up. You're really understanding what you want your brand to look like, how that comes across. You really need to have an understanding of all of that before you come to someone like me and say, okay, boom, these are the companies I'm trying to work with, especially in a space that is oversaturated and authentic content is key.
Rashida, that was so powerful what you said. You said go to these other people first. I told y'all we got a powerhouse panel. Ain't none of us in this for ego. We ain't trying to make bread off this. We're just trying to educate. Thank you, Rashida. Myah Moore, Irick. Thank you. I know you're at Merrill. You said you work in the sudden wealth management space. Can you explain to us what you mean by sudden wealth management and how you can help Black student athletes take advantage of these opportunities?
Thank you, Dr. Moore. And I will have to add a thank you to diverse representation. I think what Ncaa is doing for the community is so significant, especially in a time like this. Again, my name is Myah Moore Irick, and I'm the founder of the Irick Group at Merrill Private Wealth Management. And many of you may ask, what is sudden wealth? And it's when you quickly, either overnight or the course over a few years, come into wealth. Oftentimes, with athletes in particular, when they experience this, they may be coming from a community that hasn't talked about money regularly, right? So we just need to put that out there. So when you're navigating this new wealth and this new reality, you have to learn skills and really be able to flex different muscles and prepare accordingly, right? Luke already talked about this, Rashida already talked about this. This is exactly where I come in and what I do. I help athletes and their families get an understanding of what this new wealth means. I help them create a financial and an investment strategy for them that is focused on protecting this hard-earned money and understanding the risk. And most importantly, I work with them to ensure that they're empowered when it comes to navigating financial decisions, which may be new to them. In a way, I'm kind of like their personal CFO or chief financial officer.
So Myah, let me go here briefly. When I talk to a lot of people who manage wealth, a lot of the Black folk talk about this idea of cultural mistrust. We'll go to a Black person if we want to train Luke, we want to train trying to get our kid to the league or a scholarship. But will we go to a Black person as it relates to help managing our money? What has been your experience, Myah? Not only you, but also maybe some of your peers.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I'm not sure if it's completely cultural mistrust, but more so a lack of exposure. So, the face of wealth has changed, and yet there's still so few Black advisors. Athletes are very visible in our community. So if there's one negative thing or an instance that happens where someone, maybe takes advantage of them or something went wrong, this is all that we focus on. And media kind of puts this on repeat. So it's like there's no way for us to climb out of this. But we do exist, and the majority of us Black advisors, we're just trying to help lift our communities up. So I think that we really need to refocus this energy. And typically, like you say, Dr. Moore, when I'm first introduced or my team is introduced to a new prospective client and athlete, like they're pretty stunned. And it's usually because they haven't seen many people like me. So I think it's up to us in the community to really provide some more of that exposure. But when I get to know the athlete, it's like a no-brainer for them. And it makes total sense because they're like, wow, they understand, they realize the grit, perseverance is there, but they recognize that we probably are 10 times as smarter and work 10 times as harder to get to that same point in supporting people like them because we've survived. So, I think athletes in particular see our team and they recognize this, and it's up to us to, eliminate and not support that past narrative. We as advisors and athletes need to really own our power. So we got to get rid of this cultural mistrust. This has to stop.
That's that old school phrase, the white man's ice is colder and his sugar is sweeter. See, that's that old school advice you got to get when you sit at the feet of elders who've been there. All right, Will, let's go to you, man. Now, Will, you spend a lot of time in athletic departments in front of student athletes. What has your experience been, not only just working with them about developing their own brand and personal development, but also when it comes to conversation about name, image, and likeness?
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for the opportunity, Dr. Moore, and to my esteemed panelists. It's a pleasure to be here. When it comes to my experience with name, image, and likeness to student athletes, it's really just it's an excitement piece of it, but it's also a kind of sense of what do I do with it, right? Where do I start, where do I go? And who do I trust to help me market my brand? So you talk about the cultural mistrust piece of it, especially when we think about star athletes and maybe like AAU, things like that. They have their uncles and things like that, and they may, get to a point where they're kind of mistrusting their own people because of past experiences and past traumas. So my experience has been there's been a lot of excitement around it. And what we do at my company with Emergent executives is we focus on their ABCs, their appearance, behavior, communication skills, digital brand, and emotional intelligence. I think all these 5 skills are critical to help them develop an image that's going to be attractive to potential sponsors so Rashida can get them deals, because if you don't look the part, if you don't act the part, you will never become the part. So that's kind of been my experience, thus far. And I think the conversation sometimes really just is relegated to only football and basketball, but you're going to have a gymnastics student athlete who wants to start, doing pottery or selling wine that's really going to do well. That's why I started focusing on doing LLC formation as well. And so I think it's just a lot of it's not a lot of education that's out there right now. And that's why we're here, obviously. And the athletic departments are probably going to be, in some cases, overwhelmed, because if you think about the ratio of student athletes to athletic department administrators, it just doesn't work in their favor. And that's not only part of athletic administrators, that's where we come into play and how we can really help advance their brands in this landscape and new marketplace.
Will, you brought up something, and I want to go to Luke, and I want Rashida and Myah to jump in. You talk about how they present themselves.
Yes, sir.
I think we as Black professionals are in a quandary. We want young people to be able to express themselves through hairstyles. I don't know what the politically correct term is. I say tattoos. They may say body art or something like that. And and I'm torn, right? Because you do want them to be able to express themselves, but what is the balance there? And I'm, Myah, you're at Merrill, Rashida, you were at a big agency. Luke, you're at a white shoe law firm. How do we guide them on that? Or if we tell them, bro, you may want to cut I believe Lamar Jackson doesn't get nearly as many endorsements as he would get is because of his hairstyle, right? But I understand that may be him. So what is the fine line for us between, giving solid advice, but also telling them to compromise who they are in hopes of getting something they may never get? Let me go to you first, Luke, with that.
Listen, great question. I think it's authenticity. I think it comes back to authenticity, right? It is, Lamar Jackson may not want some deals, right? I mean, let's just be honest, right? He may want to do things with brands that want to work with him as he is today and how he wants to present himself to the world. I mean, we all have that challenge, right? So it's not just the people that we work with. All of us on this panel have to deal with this, right? I have tattoos. I wear one thing when I'm here in my home office if I'm not on Zoom, and I wear something entirely different when I go to my law firm office. And so I think what we have to be able to do, though, to your point, is have the conversation. And this is where, the Wills of the world, the Rashidas of the world, and even Myah and myself, as we reinforce what they're sharing with them, is how do you be authentically you and recognize how your authenticity will lead to certain outcomes. And you have to be okay with what those outcomes are. And if you're not, then maybe there's something that you want to change. And if you are, don't change. I think that's where it comes to play. Now, I think, though, as we bring this to the name, image, and likeness factor of college student athletes, we have to also recognize one fact. 52% of college student athletes believe that they're going to go and play professionally. less than 2% are going to go and play professionally, right? So there has to be this honesty around this education and this empowerment that Rashida and Will and Myah have all talked about that says, hey, I know that you're focused on going pro. I know that that's your focus, but as you think about your brand, think about what it might look like if your decision ends up becoming not, am I going to go and play professionally, but rather, am I going to go to grad school, or am I going to go to an interview and get a job in the professional world?
Luke, let me go to Rashida. Rashida, how do you advise your clients?
I don't think it has anything to do with looks. I think it's behavior. And I think it's the people that you have around you that represent you. So for example, Cam Newton does a really good job from a content perspective on digital media channels. His hair is as authentic as it can be. Jay-Z's hair is as authentic as it can be. You definitely have different individuals in sports and entertainment who express themselves in a very authentic way. I think it's all about your behavior. Are you showing up on time? Are you answering calls? Are you answering emails? Do you have the right people around you? Are you turning in contracts on time? Are you completing your deliverables? In addition to that, it's also your skill set, right? That's why these athletes get scholarships. A lot of the time, schools will bypass behavior and look at the skill set and say, forget it. The skill set is on point, but I think a combination of both allows you to be authentically who you want to be.
Okay. Myah, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just add, I think what Rashida, she kind of nailed it on the head when she said, and she referred to the team. So the team that you're surrounding yourself with, your friends, your allies, whoever they may be, they represent your brand. And ultimately, you know, I'm in the business of assets, but ultimately your brand is your biggest asset, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what job you're doing, no matter what sport you're playing. So if you can't come to grips with that, then there's a problem. I would also go back to, you know, values. I talk about this all day and all night as it relates to money. You need to understand what you stand for, what your purpose is, but where your values are aligned, and that right brand that's going to, you know, help continue you on the path. But I think values come into play, and I think brand is your biggest asset. And this is something we cannot ignore.
Okay. Let me pivot a little bit, because I think with a lot of the discussion around name, image, and likeness, the focus has been skewed to men in football and basketball. When I look at the landscape, I think this potentially opens up tons of opportunities for our sisters, not only in, you know, women's basketball and track, but in the non-revenue sports. My daughter, we were at Clark Atlanta visiting the other day. You know, she wants to play volleyball at HBCU, and her cousin found out that, you know, my daughter can braid hair and she's a great photographer. Oh, they said, oh, you go to an HBCU. They said, you're gonna kill it on so many different levels. So what about the opportunities, and maybe I'll come to you, Luke. What about the opportunities for Black women in this space? All right.
Listen, I think it's absolutely there. Let's look at UCLA women's gymnastics, right? I think, I mean, all of us have seen some of those routines, the number of impressions that they get on social media. And this, you know, to be honest, the brand opportunity for Black women, and just anyone really is beyond kind of where I spend my day to day. But what we know and what we very clearly see is that Black women and, you know, others in sports outside of just men's basketball and football will have plenty of opportunities. Don't forget, you've got opportunities in terms of your home market, where you're from, as well as the school and the city that you play in. You've got opportunities that go beyond just your performance. We know that there are a lot of us, Black people, who have skills, talents, and abilities to sell products, to create products, to provide services. And that's where we're going to see continued opportunity present itself in name, image, and likeness. Media likes to talk about the football and basketball because those may be the big splashy deals that we see that get reported. But day in, day out, there have been studies that have talked about women's power of influence in social media influencing greater than men. And I think we're going to see a lot of revenue come to these other non-revenue producing sports, athletes in these non-revenue producing sports, that I think will wow a lot of people.
Rashida, what's your take?
I think it's so interesting. I mean, it's very hyped up, and I think name, image, and likeness is hyped up because it's still on the amateur level. But, you know, on the professional level, we deal with this day in and day out. Women's sports on a whole, I think, is still trying to find its lane when it comes to storytelling. And so I think a lot of women athletes or female athletes have done a great job of amplifying their position and their brand. Ultimately, I believe that content is king. You know, being able to show days in the life, being able to really connect with that athlete, whether it be male or female, but specifically Black women and Black athletes or athletes of color, being able to just showcase their life on camera, on video, and utilize their digital platforms to tell those stories is really what will help put them in a position of power down the road. And I also think that they could very well make much more than they would ever make playing the sport, one, but also I truly believe that the schools will, you know, specifically like the HBCUs and your regular D1 schools, I think they will, their college departments, their content departments will help these athletes create really dope content that will help amplify their brand and ultimately pass that 2% of, am I just going to be successful in my sport? I can take that success and be an influencer. I could be an actress. I could be some type of entertainer or still be in front of the camera. I think all of that will start at the amateur level with name, image, and likeness.
Let me pivot to Myah, Will, for this one. Jaya set this entire institution up basically so Black people can work with other Black people. Myah, what would you tell some of your clients, these young athletes? Because I believe when you choose to work with a Black wealth manager or a Black agent, David Mulugeta, one of the top agents, with the University of Texas, he's getting criticized. So I really believe that whenever Black athletes or entertainers decide to do business with Black people, there is a backlash, and there is some criticism. So Myah, how would you encourage student athletes and their families to brace themselves for that criticism? And here's what I mean. If I'm an A-list volleyball player at Michigan, or if I play football at Texas or something like that, right? I think there may be a kind of expectation that I will work with, you know what I mean? I will work with people who are part of the family, so to speak. But now I'm deciding to go outside of the family. How should they prepare to deal with that criticism?
Yeah, I think from my seat, it may be a little bit different because I'm seeing this less and less. I just feel like student athletes are our leaders, they're our community citizens, as Luke and Rashida are describing, they're role models for so many others. They understand what subtle and not so subtle discrimination looks like. So over the last decade in particular, they're becoming more empowered, as they should be, and they're challenging others should this come up. And really, you want to pick the advisors that are going to be the best for your situation, that can help you navigate and understand these difficult life decisions, and be the best equipped to relate to your situation and have technical expertise to actually get the job done. So ultimately, it's the athlete's decision to pick their team, and they may have to defend it, but I think we're going to see less and less of that. We work with them, but ultimately we work for them. And that's it's the athlete who should be making the decision.
So Myah, you say these young people are really driving.
They're very well aware. It's a different time, at least from my experience, but it may be different if it's, an agent or a business manager. But from my experience, no, they're refreshed. They're excited.
And that is awesome to hear. Will, a couple of things, Will, as it relates to that question. During the plantation era, there were three things that slave owners were scared of. Number one, Black folks gathering in a large group. Number two, Black folks learning how to read. And number three, enslaved Black folks running around with money in their pocket. I mean, those three things terrified white Southerners, during the slavery era. So Will, here you are in some of these facilities where you basically are encouraging Black athletes to do all three, right? Organize, get themselves together, you know what I'm saying? Take advantage of name, image, and likeness, and basically maximize the scholarship. So do you think these student athletes will get criticized, or how do you think you will continue to be perceived in these athletic departments? Because you essentially are coming in with a message of empowerment.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I would say that, for me, it started at home. Let me kind of backtrack a little bit. And even going back to the conversation surrounding women, Black women are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs in the United States. The only thing they lack is funding. So I had to throw that tidbit in there. But as it relates to, I guess, my positioning when it comes to athletic departments, for me, I was privileged because I'm a fifth generation entrepreneur. I'm privileged. And I realized that, right? And so I grew up in North Mississippi, and when I was growing up, I didn't see a lot of empowerment beyond my father, right? I didn't see a lot of people doing different things until I moved to Texas. Like, oh wow, this brother is an attorney, this brother is a director here. Like, okay, this is possible. So when you're not exposed to these different types of things, it creates this kind of mental kind of jail, so to speak, and you don't know what you can accomplish. When I walk in and talk to these student athletes, so my background is I'm a high school has-been, right? I didn't play college sports. I played a little intramural in college. That's pretty much it. I'm good from three. Step across half court, I'm good. Better get your hand up. But aside from that, I come in, like I said, I'm not of high stature, but I come in with confidence, showing that, hey, you can do this. This is possible. So for me, the perception of me is not so much bad, because I think a lot of athletic departments, realize that the need for exposure for these student athletes to see people that look like them. And if you look across the landscape, who are the gatekeepers in terms of college athletics, the money generating sports? You look at the compliance, people working in compliance, student athlete development. We're the gatekeepers. You think about even in I forget his name, but the book is $40 Million Slaves. William Roden is his name. You talk about how jockeys they used to be black. The most successful jockeys back in the day used to be black. It's hard to find a black jockey. We've always taken care of the house. We've always been taking care of, housemaids, things like that. But when it's time for us to step up to make the revenue that we deserve, that we've been generating for hundreds and hundreds of years, it's all of a sudden a problem. But for me, I was taught to go against the grain. If you have a passion, if you have something you're good at, and you have something to give, a service, then you need to offer that. And so I feel it I see it as a responsibility, and it doesn't deter me at all. And I walk in hot every single time, because I was reading a story today about a young man, and he sent me a story about him saying that, it's really empowering to talk to someone that cares about me, that is doing something different than I've seen, because I don't have a father in my life. He's been in jail. He was sentenced to 70 years in prison. I can't relate to that, right? I can't relate to it, but what I can do is empower him to start a new cycle and break a generational thing that's going to empower his future children and student athletes alike. So that's what I kind of see it as.
Awesome. Luke, you've been at the forefront of this since we first met. You've always been passionate about this, and over the last few years, I see there are more sharks in that water. You know what I mean? So how have you been received nationally when you go places and talk about NIL? And for some of y'all know what we're talking about if you could play ball at Ohio State and go in the student union or the bookstore and see your jersey hanging up. And if you looked at the Nike tag closely with the price tag, sometimes you would see your name there, but you would not be able to get any benefit. So that's what we're talking about, this name, image, and likeness, and even with the video game stuff. So Luke, first before you answer that, then secondly, y'all laughed at LeVar Ball. Black folk clowned him. He was on this empowerment piece a long time ago, and when I see what LaMelo's doing, I'm like, he's a fool. But I don't want to digress. But Luke, my point is, how have you been received? Because you're going up against some powerful forces, right? I mean, you're sharp, you're young, like you, Rashida, and Myah, y'all are going up against powerful forces. So Luke, take us back 5 years when you first started this, and what is it like now in terms of the reception you're getting?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, at first the conversation was, we don't necessarily know if this is needed as much, right? I mean, it was like the empowerment piece. Like, let's just be honest. Let's be honest about what's even happened over the last 10 years in sports, period. Let's talk about the LeBron James effect of that he's had on empowering athletes to realize the value in owning their own content, in owning their own brand, right? I mean, if we go back 10, 15 years and the social media and all that, so we've seen athlete empowerment change over time. So the last 5 years, let's talk about this for a second. I was at I presented Black Student Athlete Summit a bunch of different years, over the past 5 or 6 years. 2 years ago, I think it was, had a conversation that said, hey, how many people think that name, image, and likeness is going to impact their student athletes? Everybody raised their hand. How many people at this point have started having those conversations to prepare student athletes for what's to come? Like 1 or 2 out of hundreds, right? Raise their hand. And part of that is because athletic departments are established, honestly, to do 3 things: to protect their brand, to protect their revenue, and to protect their student athletes. Now, I'm not going to say what the order is, because I think that order changes depending on the school that you talk to, right? And what their leadership looks like. But that's what they're focusing on. And so when I come in, my response from the student athletes is, I want this information. When I'm having conversations with student athletes, pro athletes who are making the transition, they want to know this stuff. Yes, they want to focus on their sport. They're hyper focused on their performance on the field, on the court, whatever. But they want to also learn, what does it take to be a business owner? You know, Will talked about having an LLC. What does that mean if I have an LLC, if I have a business, right? How does this work? How can I grow an empire, if you will? Athletic departments, they're in this place of dealing with a lot of different issues, COVID, you know, furloughs, cuts, all that kind of stuff. And then also knowing the name, image, and likeness is coming, but not getting the guidance necessarily on where to take it, and therefore don't always know how to respond to it. But like I started my remarks today, we know it's coming. I believe it's an ethical imperative that we focus on the education of student athletes with real world practical education. That's what they need to get. And I don't know necessarily if athletic departments are the ones to push that, but we as a community who deal with this every day, we have to push that.
So let me tell you what one coach said, and I know Rashida went to Florida State. Hopefully y'all can start winning again soon. Y'all ran the brother out of there, but and Will. So here's what some coaches will say. They'll say, Rashida, Myah, Will, I really like this and all, but tell me if Jocelyn over here signs a deal with the local Toyota dealership. Now she has class, she has practice, she got a lift, she got study hall. She doesn't have enough time in the day to do all this stuff. And ironically, they'll say if she signs a contract, then her allegiance may be to this local car dealership at the expense of her scholarship, and we are the one paying her tuition. And I think that is a legitimate. Now, I didn't like the person whose lips it came from. Let me say that. But I think that is a legitimate concern. So how do we deal with this idea of, you know, the competing priorities? Let me go to you, Rashida.
First and foremost, you're not going to do Florida State like that, okay? I don't know the last time Texas won a national championship. Okay,
Rashida,
ours was 2014.
I just work in Texas. I got Jackson State and Ohio State through my veins, but it's all good.
But in regard to your question, I think it's really interesting. I think there's a thin line between managing the responsibilities of a student athlete and having a diverse portfolio of interests. I think Michael Bennett recently had a huge tweet, like a Twitter thread about football and the commitment from a mental standpoint that you have to the game in order to be successful, and essentially how you block everything else out. And so it's a mentality where this is it for me. I mean, I know plenty of football players, just to be honest, who get a degree to do nothing with it. You know, they're just all about the game and all about the sport. And to Luke's point, that's why 52% think that they're going to make it pro, because that's all I'm concerned about. And so I don't know even how to do self-care. I don't know how to take some time out for myself, go hang out with my family, do certain things. So I think that athletes should have the ability to have other interests. If they want to cook at home and put that on video and that goes live on IGTV during the season, what's the issue? It's not a distraction. Maybe the amount of attention they may get is a distraction, but as far as I'm concerned, that's the same type of attention they get from being a student athlete. So I think the line is very thin. I really do believe, obviously, like getting your degree is really important and focusing on your sport is important. But at the same time, if you ask any parent, hey, this kid only has 4 years to play this sport and has the rest of his life to actually have a career, would you have them focus on their career or their sport? They'd probably say their career. So it's risky. They're taking a chance, but they really need to be able to diversify their interests, in my opinion, to be successful down the road.
Okay. Will, I'll come to you, then Myah, I'm coming to you another question. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah,
just on this idea about the student that doesn't have, and it's funny they're talking about, oh, well, these black kids will get exploited. It's funny they're using the word exploited now, right? That NIL will lead to the exploitation of students. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Rashida did a great job of covering it in great detail. But I do think when you talk about allegiances, you have to look at the landscape we're in right now. Like Draymond Green had a kind of viral moment talking about allegiances with teams and athletes, who has the power and control, right? When it's the athletes saying, I want out, what's the narrative? When it's the team saying, we want you out, what's the narrative competing with that? So I think we have to take that into account. Also considering when coaches leave or they have a different school that recruits them to come be a part of their school, and they leave, the students they recruited kind of high and dry, nothing stops them from doing that. So going back to Rashida's point about diversifying your portfolio, you may find a new interest. You may say, hey, maybe don't want to do this sport long term. Maybe, maybe I want to go and focus on this. It may lead to some different opportunities. And I think when you think about people that may have responsibilities back home, helping their families out, you make time for what you care about, right? So I mean, it's just one of those things where they're gonna have to make the decision, and they're really good at balancing their times and schedules already. But I think allegiances, man, is relative, to
Myah,
Dr. Moore, can I just add on to that after Will's done?
yes, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Myah.
Yeah,
I
I think some schools are kind of worried about saying, hey, you're going to take money out of our pocket. You know what I mean? If you get one of our sponsors, now they're going to be sponsoring you and they're not going to come to us. So really have to just look at the underlying point of, okay, why do you feel this way? Or why is this a problem, so to speak? And even going back to the student athlete that was at UCF, they had a great YouTube channel, couldn't earn any money off of it. And where could that have taken him, right? And I know a guy that does vending machine videos, makes 150K for that alone. So I think student athletes are going to be into it and awakening, because I'll take football, for example, because that's my experience. They've been playing this game since they were 6 years old. Run fast, jump high. They've been on this kind of feeder system, but when they learn, like, I have a passion for cooking, I have a passion for, doing things with my hands, that may lead them into a new passion, a new profession, because more often than not, after those 4 years, we see a lot of student athletes with these general degrees that don't have anywhere to go. So if you can maximize your revenue, that's going to set you up for future success, like Rashida alluded to, I would highly recommend them doing that and making the time for it, even if you have to sacrifice something that may have brought you into the institution to begin with.
Next one, Myah.
I think that this is huge, right? We keep hearing this term, and Dr. Moore, you said it before, around it being exploited, but I really think this could be more about being empowered. I, like Will, didn't play sports in college, but it's because I didn't have the choice or the time. I had to work multiple jobs to pay my tuition. But can you imagine if I had the opportunity to get an endorsement or something of that nature? I have more choices, because with money, it provides freedom and more life choices. So I think that, our students, this is more of an empowerment thing. They're young adults. We're trusting them to balance school with sports. Why can't we trust them to make a decision like this, especially if they're informed and have the right advisors around them?
Well, Myah, let me stick with you, because Will said something, I want to talk about, managing expectations from family and friends. Because if, for a lot of these men and women, some of them sending scholarship checks home, things of that nature, some of them in college. I had a young brother from Texas, he would drive to Shreveport. Shreveport is 4.5 hours from Austin. Drove to Shreveport after practice, came back the next morning, he missed class to practice. I said, man, what'd you go home for? He said, oh man, I had to go talk to somebody. You know what I mean? So a lot of them are even managing relationships amongst the family. So Myah, with this new avenue that's about to open up, where they can get some money from the name, image, and likeness, how would you manage your client? How would you tell them how to manage those expectations? Because I've seen parents and children fall out over money. You know what I mean? I've seen relationships built over years destroyed. So how would you, Myah, help them manage those expectations?
I mean, and especially for a college student, when you're dealing with so many other things, this provides so much more additional stress, in a positive way, but in also not a positive way, right? When we don't come from a wealthy community, there are so many demands and expectations of us. And I can relate to this in most of my clients in the sudden wealth space. So when it comes to family and expectations, the best thing you can do is be really discreet about what you're making and earning. I've seen so many people trip up on this. Really, don't share, only share on a need to know basis. Anything that's out there in public around contracts and things of that nature, you really can't help that. And the key to help our families is to really bring them along in the fold when it comes to financial education. And the more that they understand how to manage money and navigate their own financial decisions, the less likely that they're going to come to you for help, and the better prepared they're going to be just for their own purposes. So I spend a lot of time with athletes and their entire family unit. Sometimes we do like financial boot camps and things of that nature, just to make sure the information that they're hearing is the same information that their full family unit is hearing. Because the best way, from my perspective, to live, families out of these types of communities, and also sometimes out of poverty, is by access to education. And in sudden wealth, we see this a lot. The other thing that I find really helpful beyond educating them from, a financial perspective and educating family is around helping them find a way to outsource their response. And I'll give you an example. You know, there was a younger athlete who kept getting a lot of asks from the community around charitable gifts. So I did a lot of role playing with him, and he wasn't quite comfortable. So instead I said, well, just tell him your business manager or your mom or me runs the foundation or your donor advised fund, and outsource your response. So just send that person to one of us and we'll say no for you, right? So there's tricky ways around it, but ultimately they're gonna have to be comfortable with saying no. And sometimes it's gonna take a lot of, you know, role playing and practicing, because if you continue to give in, you're gonna continue to enable those people and they will continue to ask you, and it never stops. It'll be your whole life, even when you're no longer on a contract or have any endorsements. So financial education, and then trying to outsource your response if you're not comfortable with responding on your own.
That's a good one. Shoot, I need to start outsourcing some responses. But anyway,
You can role play too, Dr. Moore.
So Luke, let me ask you, Luke, let me follow what Myah said. Because I think sometimes the media paints the picture as if these family members are just leeches. I mean, what I've heard young men and women say, you know, it texts me of a lot of sisters playing professional volleyball, WNBA. What they say is, no, I want to help my aunt out because I spent the night at her house every weekend. You know what I mean? So it's not like these parents, these brothers got claws in them. It's like they understood that a community helped them get there, and now they want to give back to the community. So Luke, how do you know, the Myah things help them outsource the response, you know, be transparent about the money, because $1 million contract, we know it's not $1 million. So Luke, what advice do you have in terms of helping them manage those expectations?
Education. Period, point blank. It's education, right? Like,
what does that mean?
Yeah, so we've talked about this. We've kind of been around kind of the edges on some of this, but it's truly education. When we talk about this, it's understanding the education around the contracts that they've signed, right? So, you know, Myah even brought it up, right, around being discreet with what you make. Well, let's talk about the fact that a lot of times these endorsement deals have confidentiality clauses that are included in them anyway, that you shouldn't be talking about them, right?
Look, I'm not going to tell my uncle who took me to AAU practice 3 nights a week.
Well, but this is the point. This is where education comes in, not just for the athlete, it's for the family too. It's to help them understand. So here's the thing. We know that a lot of these athletes, a lot of the clients that we work with at the professional level, and we know this is going to continue on downstream to especially our Black college student athletes, there is a desire for the family to help protect their son or daughter who's the student athlete, but there's not the education to know how to do that. So if it's the first time that an athlete gets an endorsement deal, most likely that's the first time they or their family has ever seen one. Okay. So they need to understand, what does this mean? How do I get paid? What do I have to withhold for taxes because I'm about to get paid in gross instead of net, right? Does this come to me directly? Does it go through an LLC like Will talked about? Understanding the business aspects. So guess what? Let's empower the family, who we already know the trust is there most times, not every time. We've dealt with other families where the trust isn't there, but the trust is oftentimes there. So let's make sure that we're empowering and educating the family as well, so they understand and can come along with that athlete through the process. Okay.
Luke, one brother saying, I'm just trying to buy my uncle a pickup truck. I'm just trying to buy my uncle a pickup truck. That's all he wanted, 40 up 150. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's that joint. But this is where the team comes into play, right? Because Myah's going to look at it like, you've got your needs and your wants, your nows and your laters. She's going to figure out, how does this all fit in from a financial perspective so that you're not doing more harm than good. Because we see a lot of families, a lot of athletes who want to buy mom or dad a house, a family member a house when they make it into the league. Well, we have conversations of, okay, but let's understand what all goes into that. Even if you pay the house off, you've got property tax, you've got maintenance and upkeep and all this kind of stuff. If you last the league average, are you setting up that family member for success or potentially for challenge, right? So that's where the education has to come in. Yes, help your family out. Yes, let's figure out ways to do it, but you got to be educated and work with the team to be able to do that.
Okay, Rashida, Luke brought up the word team. So when athletes are building their team, what should they look for in a marketing firm when they're building their team? After they've talked to Luke, Myron, Will, now they come to you. What should they look for in terms of marketing?
I think there are 3 things that stand out for me. I think the first thing is obviously their book of business. What have they done? Are they bullshitting you or are they legit? So you want to see the deals that they've done. and what they've been able to build from a revenue standpoint for their clients. I think the second thing is really understanding where we are, especially in a digital, from a digital perspective, especially post-pandemic. Everything is digital. Every company that we're talking to, it's Instagram, it's Facebook, it's TikTok, it's Triller, it's influencers, it's who's ever creating the content, it's YouTube. All of these different platforms are allowing individuals to generate revenue. So really making sure that they have an understanding of digital platforms and how they can push your brand, because ultimately a marketing agency is a sales agency. That's what we do. We go out, we put you in front of brands, we keep you top of mind. And then last but not least, I think it's really, really important, and we do a lot of this for free because it is what it is, but very similar to what Will does, helping them build that brand that they need to authentically be, so that it is easier for us to do our job. If they hate being in front of the camera, it's just not gonna work. I'm not gonna lie to you. We're in a space right now where if you are too shy to be in front of the camera, well then be behind the camera, but we're not doing the same thing here. We're not helping you get along to where you want to be from a marketing standpoint in your with being an athlete. I actually have an athlete right now who's really, really into crypto, and has started putting more content out there. So sometimes it's not the traditional deals. It's not just your Nike deal. It's not your trading card deals. It's really finding the interest of that athlete and then being able to take that, create content from it, and then put it in front of brands so that they can monetize those opportunities.
Rashida, I know this. If I was a student athlete on this call right now, I would be looking at my team. I got Myah gonna handle the money, Rashida gonna handle the marketing, Luke gonna handle the legal stuff, and Will gonna get my person right. Will gonna work on me. So folks, you got a team in place right now. And I say that because when I was teaching at LSU, one of my students, he won't mind me sharing this, went to that drafted NBA. He was a one and done cat, had 3 good games in the tournament, Myah, that was it, you know, and got millions. But he said when he got drafted, the next day, the owner flew him to the team facility. He said, not in the conference room, but on the private jet, Rashida. It was not only the owner, but all the owner's friends who represented different kind of industries. And he said, as a 19-year-old, he's on there by himself with all these other folks. He said the unwritten rule was that he would spend all his money with everybody on that jet. And he said that's what he did because he said he just felt there was this subtle pressure to it. Will, let me come to you with this. Go ahead.
If I could add really quick, one thing based on, you know, Luke, Myah, and Will's points earlier, I think generational wealth is a class within itself, and that ultimately will help with name, image, and likeness, number one. And then number two, I think every entity or league that hosts student athletes, their fare is ownership. Mm-hmm. Once players start to own their brands and own who they are, then it becomes a threat to their pocket. So I think those two things, if guys and gals were going to classes just about those two things, the entire landscape would change.
Rashida, you know, you said where I was just about to go to Will on this. Are we being naive to think that the billion-dollar industry of college athletics is automatically just going to lay over and let these Black kids start making all this money? Because when I give my talks in front of a lot of white alums, I said, how many of you all think it's a privilege for a Black kid to play ball here? All the hands go up. And I tell them, you know, I wasn't good in English, but to me, privilege means there's something that's not earned, right? And so my question, Will, is throughout our history as Black folk, whenever there has been an opportunity for us to acquire capital, right? There has always been roadblocks put in place. So, Will, are we being naive to think that these athletic departments are just going to let these brothers and sisters get paid?
No, we're not being naive to it, but I think, you know, you get ran over at some point. I think you've seen it over time with Missouri football team and other football teams. And I use football as an example, but they know the power that they have, you know, and the biggest barrier, I believe, to changing college athletics has been a lack of economic power collectively, because they say, okay, if we sit out this game, then I'm not going to be able to, you know, get drafted. I'm never going to make any money, right? Whereas their counterparts may say, well, if I don't play, then I'll just go work for my dad and, you know, do this and I'll figure it out, right? We don't have those same kind of opportunities. When you talk about privilege versus earning, one of these things is not like the other, to your point. So they're not going to roll over. But I think once legislation goes into place, you're going to see some lawsuits, and Luke will definitely be able to speak more to that. So they're not going to like it at all. I mean, because you're going to be driving around and seeing student athletes, having nicer cars than maybe, some of the administrators. But I think it's one of those things where the education has to be in place. Okay, what do you spend this money on, these resources on? Because if you come from an environment where, like, for instance, where I came up, I saw just, a lot of money being spent on jewelry and cars and rims and things like that. That's what I saw. So what did I want when I grew up? Those kinds of things. So until we educate them on what they should be spending these resources on and how they can build generational wealth, then it's going to be an issue. But I think college athletics and just the landscape in general is in for a rude awakening. I think it's going to be kind of slow and insidious and gradual. But when they look up, they're going to look around. It's like, wow, like we may have millionaire student athletes walking around our very campus. So what does that do for their educational experience? I mean, they're already, in some cases, already quarantined, so to speak, to compounds.
They've been in the bubble.
Yeah, they've been in the bubble already within the athletic departments. So what's that look like, long term? So I think we're going to see both sides of it. I don't think people are really just understanding the gravity of what this is going to do long term. Hence the pushbacks and the delays in making decisions, because I think they are kind of scared, because when you talk about the history of Black people, the key has to be it is kind of a microcosm of sports. Creating separation is key. If you separate the Black man, the Black woman, you can win. If you can divide, you can conquer, right? If you can create separation in sports, you can also win. So it's all about creating separation, but what kind of separation are you trying to create exactly? And so I think the biggest thing we have to also think about is when our student athletes are on these campuses and they're already, being quarantined, now they're making money. And so this hubris builds up. Like, I got all this money and resources. Now they're even more removed from the campus experience, right? And so are they even caring about the education that can lead to long-term wealth and how to save that money and keep it, for generations to come? So I think it's very multifaceted, but that's kind of my general take on it.
I think this is revolutionary. And, I talk about how they always put up roadblocks. I remember when I was teaching at LSU, when Ricky Williams got drafted and he signed with No Limit Sports. People laughed at Leland Hardy. Black folk laughed at him. You know what I mean? It may not have been the best deal, but he was the person who basically got the Williams sisters going. And so I just wonder, talking about LeVar Ball. LeVar Ball was nothing but a marketer. He was just saying, and he has done a tremendous job raising 3 boys. He says crazy stuff, right? But look at what LaMelo's doing, and look at what the other brother. And I think because of what LaMelo's doing, the other brother who's not in the league now, I think he'll get a shot somewhere. And so, Jai, I know we got a question and answer, but let me kind of throw this last question. Let me throw this last question out there. What you all are talking about, again, is very, very revolutionary. A couple of years ago, I was invited up to Aspen. You heard of Aspen before? I didn't even know Black folk were allowed to go there, all right? But it was NFL owners, NBA owners, Major League Baseball, NHL, European soccer, right? And they was on the whole Kaepernick piece. So I walk in the facility. I did not have imposter syndrome at all. I knew I belonged. There were like 4 black people at the entire event. Me, Michael Wilbon, the brother from New Orleans on the Congressional Black Caucus, and then Kirby John Caldwell, one of the minority owners of the Houston Texans. And what they were talking about, Myah, for 2 days, this elite group of owners, they were talking about money. And I have a very healthy ego. My session started at 1 o'clock. Jerry Jones' session started at 1 o'clock. His son was talking about how to maximize revenue from a stadium. Hell, nobody came to my sessions till I started talking loud and making real provocative stuff. But the point was, there are all these conversations, Giant, going on, right? It seems, Giant, as if we're focusing on the game and these other people, and it's not behind closed doors. They are strategizing, having meetings and conferences. How do we keep all this capital together? So, Jai, I want to thank you for pulling this group together. All right?
No, thank you. This was amazing. Thank you guys so much. And we already have a ton of questions from the audience. So we're going to delve in for the next 30 minutes and try to get through as many questions as possible. The first question to you guys is, let's pull it up. How do we as student athletes counteract or start the conversation about name, image, and likeness with older administrators with a set mindset?
Demand it. I mean, I'll just jump in, right? Demand it. Go to the athletic director. Go to your AD responsible for student athlete development. Go to compliance. Go to whomever is going to listen and demand it.
Demand what? Demand what?
Demand the education, demand the opportunity to be empowered, right? So what we've talked about today, just for the last hour, we've stuck our pinky toe into this, notion of empowerment, education, preparation, family development, etc. Right? So when you think about it, because the other thing we didn't talk about, which is a whole other topic for another day, is the transfer portal and how transfer portal rules are changing and how athletes are having opportunities to potentially have even more leverage than they've had before. So to go to say, hey, you know what? As student athletes, we've come together to say we want to be educated on what does it mean to have a business of the entrepreneurship of name, image, and likeness. What speakers are you bringing in to help prepare us? Right? I mean, demand that information.
Isn't that more of the I got to talk to the coach mentality? I got to talk to the coach about an internship. I got to talk to the coach about study abroad. I mean, why are we relying upon them to do anything?
Well, the number one answer is because I know myself and all of us, we're not cheap. We don't do this for free. This is our job. Somebody's got to pay the bill to have us fly here and fly there to go talk to people. So I don't want it to be the student athletes, right? If it's an ethical imperative that student athletes receive education, then the school should pay for that to prepare them. Also, so that they can protect their student athletes and ultimately their brand long term.
Luke, I would say before they go to administration though too, they should make sure they're educated about the subject, because there's nothing worse than showing up and not knowing what you're talking about. And that's the first place they're going to cut you off at the knees. So make sure you've listened to all of Luke's talks, right, Luke? And make sure you have your list of places that you can reference that you can actually speak to, what you're asking them for, because it's one thing to go up there and ask for a bunch of things, but if you're not educated and empowered around it, it's not going to do you much good because they're not going to take you seriously.
Absolutely right.
I think the next question is for you, Myah. It says, personally, I subscribe to the financial strategy to save a third, invest a third, and spend a third. From an athlete's perspective, what advice would you give to ensure that an athlete is being smart about investing, living comfortably, but at the same time being allowed to enjoy some of the revenue they're bringing in?
Yeah, so I really think it depends on that person's circumstance, because everyone's situation is so incredibly different. Dr. Moore touched on this before. Some of us support other family members. Some of us have, more income coming in a short amount of time versus, 5-10 years from now, at least guaranteed income, right? So I think it really depends on your situation. What I like to tell people is you should be saving enough that you can feel it, that it hurts. If it's not hurting and you're not uncomfortable, then it's not enough. It's okay to treat yourself occasionally, but you should have at least a back of the napkin, longer term financial plan. And if you have further questions about what you think that should look like, you can, email me or reach out. But everyone's situation is different. I would max, if you have a job and if you have some kind of, retirement plan of some sort, I would always max out anything that's tax deferred savings first, like a retirement plan or an individual retirement account.
Okay. Next question. With the NCAA creating name, image, and likeness policies that don't allow the schools to assist the student athlete, it seems like it's creating a wild, wild west landscape. What do the panelists think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, I'll let Luke speak to this probably more in detail, but I do agree. And I think that's why you're seeing all the different, states coming up with individual laws and things like that to say, hey, we're not comfortable where this is going. So I definitely think that's a possibility. But then I think you get into the point of conflict of interest with schools as well. So they're trying to protect the student athletes as well as the schools to kind of prevent some of those barriers from going up that Dr. Moore kind of talked about. But I'm sure Luke can add more to that.
Yeah, I mean, so a couple things. One, let's also remember the NCAA is the schools too, right? So we've got the NCAA that's really just the member institutions. And one of the reasons why the NCAA, i.e. the member institutions, don't want to have rules where schools can be involved in helping to guide student athletes is a liability perspective, right? They don't want to be responsible for, held liable for telling a student athlete to do this deal or don't do this deal or whatever it is, and ultimately the student athlete loses out and the school can be held responsible. Get that. That being said, however, is when we've been having this conversation around empowerment, education, preparation, and everything, that's where the school can get involved. That's where the school can help prepare. bringing in a Will, bringing in a Rashida to talk more, bringing in a Myah, you know, having conversations around how do you make decisions? How do you understand contracts, right? So if you go back to education, especially around processes, so what is going to be your process when you get presented with a handful of marketing agents that want to work with you? What's going to be your process when you have decisions to make? Like one of the questions, you know, Leonard brought up earlier around practice time, film time, study hall, doing, you know, showing up to do a photo shoot and all that. How are you going to allocate your time and think through that? Well, you're going to have to think about, you know, is the school prepared to enforce or rather reinforce lessons learned around process, around decision making, around due diligence of people who want to work with you? I mean, that's where I think the school can play a role. Is it going to be the wild, wild west at first? Yes. I think we would absolutely be naive to think that when this first comes into play, that everything is going to be buttoned up and no one's going to get, you know, harmed or anything like that. But the goal is, as long as we're pushing that people can be made aware and educated, not just the student athlete, but also their families around name, image, and likeness and how to prepare and protect yourself, then I think over time, maybe, you know, I've got a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old, maybe by the time they go off, if they were to become student athletes, that things will have been worked out by then, such that this is something that we look at and say, can't believe we haven't been doing this for the past 70 years.
Mm-hmm.
Let me push back on this wild, wild nest narrative, because a lot of things I hear are very similar to what slave owners said time of the Civil War. You can't emancipate them. They'll starve. They don't know how to take care of themselves. It'll be, you know, it'll be chaos. And so, but understand, people are saying that stuff because they want to, you know, maintain their interest. And the interest of the athletic industrial complex as a whole is to keep student athletes completely unempowered, powerless, right? And to basically keep them focused on one thing, right? And that's moving that ball down the field.
Great point. The next question, maybe this is for you, Rashida. How do you advise someone new to the field to go about securing endorsements for potential or future clientele?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. How do you advise someone new to this field to go about securing endorsements for potential or future clientele?
It depends on who they're asking for, as an agent perspective or as an athlete. So, okay, I'll answer for both. I'll answer for both. From an athlete perspective, it really depends on if you're building a team. I highly recommend everyone build a team, but you know, I think in this space you're going to find some niche people who have niche audiences, and so maybe they don't need an entire team. Everyone needs to have a lawyer. Everyone needs to have an attorney, period. Like someone that reviews your contracts. But if you're a smaller brand, I think a lot of times opportunities will come to your inbox, or you could DM bigger brands that may have opportunities for you to do activations with them. On the bigger scale, as a marketing agent, our job essentially is to put you in front of every brand possible that authentically aligns with what you're looking to promote from your brand. So if you're into water, we're bringing you to Aquafina and Essential Water and Smart Water, all of these different brands, so that they have a budget, that marketing budget that they're looking to fulfill. And honestly, it's who they know. So what athlete or what influencer or what personality is in front of me that I have access to that I can activate this deal with? So I think it just depends on the team that you build around you. If you want to handle it on your own, obviously having a bunch of responsibilities and then having to sell yourself to brands can be a lot. And so it's very helpful to have a marketing agent assist you with that. And typically, I can speak for me, I don't know about other marketing agencies, but we typically charge based on a fee percentage. So it's just essentially whatever opportunities we bring to the table is what we make. If there are no opportunities that come to the table, we're ass out. So there's some help in that, whereas like an attorney may be initially more expensive, but it's absolutely crucial. It is. I cannot stress, if anyone walks away from this panel as a student athlete or anyone in that name, image, and likeness space, you need an attorney. They need to read everything that you're signing. Do not sign anything without an attorney reviewing it. And don't think that you can review it yourself and know what's going on. because and or is different, is what I'm saying.
Rashida, I love what you're talking about.
Co-signing Luke. Next question, I think this is geared towards you, Myah. How critical is tax planning for student athletes prior to going professional?
You said how, I'm so sorry, Jaya, you cut out for a second. How
critical is
critical?
tax planning for student athletes prior to going professional?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly important to focus not only on taxes, but also on the fine print as it relates to how you're compensated and how it also may impact things like scholarships and any other type of aid you receive. You know, if you've applied and utilized like FAFSA and things of that nature. I think this is where it comes into play to make sure that you have an appropriate financial advisor and even more appropriate, a CPA or an accountant that's giving you guidance not only on what you're going to have to pay at the end of the year, but also what you're going to have to pay maybe in estimates. And this is the whole purpose why I talk about the family education and not just the education of the athlete, because sometimes when someone's coming to you with those expectations and asks, they need to understand that maybe what you got paid really isn't what you're going to get, because a bunch of it is going to be due in taxes. So it's really, really important to understand how each one of these contracts or endorsements is going to be paid to you, in what increments, what you're really going to be taking home, and how it's going to impact you longer term, and how it's going to impact other aid that you may receive from, you know, financial aid and things of that nature.
Yeah, I just to jump in on there too, I mean, it's absolutely right in what Myah talks about in terms of the importance of a CPA. Also, don't forget, you know, depending on where you earn that income could play a role as well, which makes it much more complex. Earning it in various states, depending on where you actually do that work, could cause the requirement for a state tax filing in that state. So having a CPA as part of that team, as part of that overall kind of, you know, team for that conversation is important as well.
Okay, the next question is for you, Rashida. Rashida, you mentioned that your book of business is the most important aspect of a marketing agent. How did you sell yourself and get your first deal before you had a book of business? Asking as someone trying to enter the industry.
That's a really good question. So it's just one of the tools you want to have in your toolbox. If you don't have it, it doesn't mean you don't have a toolbox. I'll start there. And everyone has a start. For me, I utilize my relationships. That ultimately is what helped push me into the industry and gave me my first opportunity. I think relationships are so important in this industry. I cannot stress that enough. Who you know is key. I mean, LeBron's team, if you look at him, it's all about who he knew. And in the mindset that he was in, being able to put them in a position to be successful. So you definitely just want to make sure that you are building relationships with individuals all around you, not only just athletes, but people in the front office, friends in the classroom, colleagues in the classroom, etc., because you never know where it can come into play and be of value. And you're not trying to be fake and you're not trying to please everyone, but it just goes back to how important it is to have relationships. Me literally just knowing Luke through a Florida State panel that we did is what allows me to speak to this audience today. So it can be the small things like having conversations like these, and it can be a big thing like being able to secure your first athlete or a client.
And the next question is really open to all of you. The question is, do you picture name, image, and likeness initially having an adverse effect on HBCUs, since athletes will now be drawn to the markets with the largest commercial exposure?
I don't necessarily think that's an HBCU issue. I think in some ways it could be a benefit, you know, in some markets. And it all depends. I mean, there are some markets, say for instance, like if you go like, you know, let's say I won't mention a different market. I want to hate anyone's school, but there's some markets that are more rural and slower than other markets, right? You know, even within the state of Florida, state of Texas. I mean, Lubbock and Dallas are two different markets. But the loyalty, the fan loyalty, I would say in Lubbock, Texas, is definitely runs much deeper than it would in Dallas, Texas, right? And so I think, you know, when you look at different markets and HBCUs, I think there's good opportunity for HBCUs to even say, hey, you know, let's really focus in on this and keep this money here. So when these student athletes graduate, they'll be more apt to donate back to the schools in the future, right? So I think it's an opportunity there because we lost a lot of revenue from HBCUs when the kind of great shift happened in the 70s, and so I think there may be opportunity there, but it goes back to the point of education. Are the HBCUs equipped? Do they have the resources? Do they have the education? Do they have the personnel, the staff to educate and really sell themselves like, hey, you can really come here and we can really just focus in on this.
And I'll say this,
and that can be a potential, and they're not giving the money initially, but later on in the future, it could be a long-term benefit for HBCUs.
And I'll say this, all HBCUs are not equal. You know what I mean? I went to Jackson State where every Saturday night we put 50,000 people in a stadium. My wife went to UCLA, said she had never saw that many black folk in one place at one time. But then a couple of years later, we're in DC one weekend in the fall. I'm excited to go to a Howard game. Nobody's there. But my boy said Howard doesn't have that. They don't have a football tradition or like FAM or Bethune-Cookman. So I think you got these larger HBCUs that are in the deep South with much more of a, particularly as it relates to football, much more of a following, than some smaller ones.
The next question is, in the current climate of cancel culture, how do you help student athletes choose endorsements with companies that will not lead to a negative impact on themselves and or their teams?
That's a great question. I think it's very rare that you align yourself with a company that ends up not having the same moral values as you. There's typically, in the contracts that we negotiate, we have a moral clause on both sides, on the athlete side and on the brand side. So it's really just, a PR strategy if shit hits the fan. There's nothing you can do about a company that if initially you thought was on par with your beliefs and your morals and how you behave, and they go and do something that does not represent you or your brand. You release a statement, you drop them, and you keep it moving. Just making sure that you do your part. Your marketing agent needs to do their part on making sure that the company is a good company and it supports what's important to you. I think it's really that simple.
And I want to add into that because I think what Rashida said is so important. And this is why it's important to have professionals doing that, right? A lot of people don't talk about dual morals clauses, right? Like, and what that means is most of the time we have the one-sided. You'll see the one-sided come where it's like, hey, if the player says something, does something, is arrested, etc., anything that could bring the company, the brand into moral disrepute, then the brand can terminate that contract. But when Rashida talks about a reverse morals clause or that morals clauses that go both ways, now it's like, hey, if the company does something, right, that brings them in. So if we think about the summer of 2020 that we had as it relates to racial injustice, if we think about the divisive nature of our elected leadership and everything that happened in 2020 leading into 2021, if you're an athlete that has engaged in a contract and you have that reverse morals clause and you have the CEO or the president or a key person representative of that company do something that is, bringing that company into disrepute that could have an impact on your brand, yes, absolutely, you should be able to walk away. And that's why what Rashida talks about is so critically important.
Definitely.
Jaya, the only thing I would add is I think that if someone has the privilege to have lots of choices and options when it comes to endorsements, and they have a strong sense of purpose and believe in something, I think it's a perfect opportunity to show up as an advocate in a lot of different ways by selecting brands you're aligning with to make sure they represent your people. So if you look at their board, if you look at their C-suite, if you're making sure that they have fair compensation. I mean, this is how I coach my clients on how they invest. Why not opt in and support the companies that are aligned with your values? It would be the same thing as it relates to, I think, signing a certain contract with a brand or aligning yourself with different endorsement deals. You can go deeper into just looking at what the initial offer is, but what the brand and the company actually stand for and who they employ.
Definitely. And I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. The next question is, what influence can or will the NCAA have on regulating how much a student athlete makes and what deals they can or cannot do?
So maybe I'll jump in first, but as it relates to how much they can make, Congress and pretty much all of these deals have made it very clear that they won't be able to, if with federal legislation, they won't be able to limit the amount that a student athlete's going to be able to make, right? So that piece is kind of, you know, taken care of from that perspective. As it relates to what deals they can or can't do, I think we most definitely will see some limitations, right? And that will most likely be based on school or based on institution. And we see that in the professional ranks already, right? If you're in the NFL or the NBA, there are certain things you can't endorse tobacco products and, you know, like alcohol, other areas, you know. So I think we'll see that type of limitation as it comes to the college level with name, image, and likeness. But even that is going to be a very slippery slope where I think the schools will have to show that their decisions are in line with what is kind of standard, right? In the fact that these student athletes are role models and could have an impact on younger generations, et cetera. And therefore, certain things like tobacco, alcohol, and things along those lines don't align. But to use that as a tool for denying athletes the opportunities to take on name, image, and likeness deals, I don't see that happening.
Okay, and next question is with regards to intellectual property. The question is, intellectual property protection will be key for many of these athletes, especially when dealing with brands and determining ownership of the IP market to make sure their IP is not stolen or used without permission. We'd love to hear the panel's thoughts with regards to intellectual property protection.
I'll really just jump on that really quick. That's something that comes up a lot on our influencer side, actually, what they own and how much ownership they're giving away. And I think, Luke, a suggestion to you is to have its own conversation on negotiation, because your marketing agent, you may not have a marketing agent or someone always negotiating on your behalf. And one thing that companies love to say is this is standard and this is what everyone does, and you're essentially giving everything away in perpetuity. So it's really, really important to understand that no one owns your content, no one owns your brand and what you create for it. And there's always an opportunity to negotiate what fee is associated with that.
Absolutely right. I had a deal recently with a pro athlete where they were going to get paid X amount of dollars to show up at different events for these trade events for this particular company. It was an endorsement deal. They're going to get paid X number of dollars. And there was language in the intellectual property provision that said that any pictures or any media that the company takes during those events will be owned by the company and they can use them in perpetuity for marketing purposes. And that's where the lawyer gets involved to say, absolutely not. As long as you're going to continue to use the brand of the player, the intellectual property of the player to sell your brand, you'll continue to pay the player. Right? And so it's that piece. And it's so important because what Rashida said, not all marketing agents, especially if it's a family member that's never really done it before, but you trust them and everything, they don't all understand that. So what a lot of times people care most about is how much do I get paid or how much does the athlete get paid and what do they have to do? So do they have to show up for commercial shoots? Do they have to show up somewhere for a speaking engagement? What do they have to do? That information is usually on page 1 of the marketing agreements. And then you have all these other pages that talk about other things. Indemnification, who can you hold responsible if something negative were to happen to you and you were harmed in some way, intellectual property and beyond. So that's the importance of understanding the contract. But to get back to the question on IP, this is where understanding, if you have a phrase, a name, a logo, what have you, you want to protect that with trademark protections. And you want to make sure you're clear as to if someone says they'll do it for you, you have to understand who's actually owning. You want to own, as the student athlete, talking to the student athletes here, you want to own, whether it's you individually or you through your own LLC, you want to own your trademarks, right? If you've come up with something creative that you've written and maybe have performed, you want to own those copyrights, right? Like that intellectual property is so critically important because that is actually what you're licensing out to brands to use. So.
And Luke, just an extension of that, I think the thing that a lot of people often forget to ask about too is if they use it after something's happened to you, make sure that your family's getting paid for it, right? So part of your financial plan includes an estate plan and your wealth plan. What's going to happen? Who's going to be paid to your estate? Should they still keep using your name, image, and likeness?
And just to piggyback off of Luke's point, I know I'm not on the panel, but as an attorney, I just want to piggyback off Luke's point for a second as well, because I do practice intellectual property law, is that it's really important for these athletes to also understand the different types of intellectual property. I know we're throwing around terms like trademarks and copyrights, and oftentimes a lot of athletes don't know the differences between different types of IPs, like patents, like trademarks, and copyrights. So I think it's really important to understand the different types of intellectual property, and really the one that's going to be most important for student athletes is that trademark piece. So it's really important that you understand what a trademark is, you know, what can be trademarked. And the great thing about trademarks, and that, you know, pertains to your name, logos, slogans, is that they last forever. So unlike other types of intellectual properties, once you do get that trademark protection, it lasts indefinitely. And one other piece of that, it does take a long time to get a trademark. So for any student athletes thinking about doing that, it's not something you can apply for today and get tomorrow. I mean, the process usually takes about a year from the time you submit your application to the time you actually get your trademark. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, I'm going to jump back out of the conversation and say that we have actually just run out of time. And but before we close out the panel, I just want to take a quick second to thank all of you guys. And if any of you are open to sharing your contact information, it doesn't necessarily need to be your email, even maybe just like a social media handle for people to get in touch with you. If we could just take a minute to kind of share ways to get in touch with all of you guys for people tuning in. Luke, I'll start with you.
Sure, at Luke Fedlam. So my name, I think, is on the screen. So just at Luke Fedlam on Clubhouse, on Twitter, on IG, and all that. And I'll just add one quick thing. Jaya is a fire attorney, and I oftentimes will send, I know she's here in the diverse representation capacity, but I will oftentimes have her work with some of my clients as it relates to entertainment law and things like that. So definitely make sure you add her too from that perspective. But at Luke Fedlam.
Thanks, Luke. How about you, Myah?
Instagram at Myah Moore Irick, and then LinkedIn, where I push out a lot of content. Actually, a lot of students tend to find me there. It's just my name, Myah Moore Irick.
Well,
yeah, for me, yeah, just at W_Baggs, BAGGS, or just type in Will Baggett and it should pop up.
Rashida?
I'm at Rashida Gayle on Instagram. I just recommend reaching out on my Instagram because that's the place that I answer most of the messages that I get. LinkedIn's just overload for me. So just slide in my DMs.
And Len?
I'm straight on Twitter, Instagram. Y'all can just send me an email. I was talking to myself. Because the people who pay me not on Twitter, all right? So I'm just old school email, and I you know, I'm not one. I don't walk around like this all day. You know what I mean? We had Jamel Hill on campus last year, Luke, and you know, she's just telling me, man, how, you know, people in her generation, y'all got to manage that stuff like all the time. You know what I mean? So, Jai, I'm just old school with it. All right.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank all of you guys for sharing your insight, your knowledge today. You're all phenomenal. Really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. We will be sharing a replay of this event later this week, so keep an eye in your inbox. But thank you, and we hope to see you at the next event.
Thank you.